All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to dig into some fascinating material.
Well, today we're looking at something that's, I think, particularly relevant for all those environmental health officers out there.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, we're going to be exploring those hygiene rules that every food business in England has to follow.
Right. Absolutely essential stuff.
It is, and we've got some really key documents to guide us through this. We've got the Food Law Code of Practice.
Okay.
We've got Regulation,
Ah,
EC, No 1980-2002, which is also known as the General Food Law.
mm-hmm.
And then we've got the Food Safety and Hygiene England Regulations 2013.
Yeah, those are really the core documents, the ones you'll be using day in and day out.
So let's kick things off with that code of practice.
Yeah.
It's interesting to me how, England really leans on this code. It's kind of like their go-to guide for local authorities when it comes to food safety. What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's incredibly comprehensive, almost like a detailed instruction manual for ensuring food safety across the country.
Yeah, like a manual. And I noticed that one of the big things it stresses is having all these, documented procedures in place.
Yes, that's really key. The code actually mandates that local councils, and that includes yours, of course, have these very specific written procedures for pretty much every scenario you can imagine.
Wow, so everything's covered.
Pretty much. Think about it. Outbreaks of foodborne illness, keeping your database of food establishments up to date, even what to do if an establishment's approval gets suspended or needs to be reinstated. It's all laid out in black and white.
So no more scrambling around during a crisis trying to figure out what to do. You just refer to the code and you know exactly what steps to take.
Exactly. And that's a huge part of what makes the code so effective. It ensures consistency and a standardized approach across all the different local authorities.
Right, so everyone's on the same page.
Precisely. And that consistency is further reinforced by the emphasis on cooperation and information sharing. Local authorities aren't just expended to work together, they're actually required to share information with each other and with the Food Standards Agency, the FSA.
So it creates this network of EHOs all across the country.
Exactly. A network of EHOs all working together, sharing knowledge and best practices, ultimately keeping the food supply safe.
Love that. Now let's move on to something that might sound a little familiar. Regulation. EC, that is
Yeah.
1780-2002, the General Food Law. This one actually came from the EU, right?
It did. And despite Brexit, a good chunk of EU food law is still very much in play in England. This particular regulation is especially important because it lays the groundwork for food safety across the entire food production chain.
Wow, from start to finish.
Literally, farm to fork.
So for our listeners out there, those EHOs working hard on the ground, what are some of the key principles from this regulation that they should really keep in mind?
Well, one of the most fundamental ones is the principle of risk analysis.
Okay, risk analysis.
This means that any decisions about food safety should be grounded in scientific evidence. You're not just reacting to problems as they pop up, you're being proactive, identifying potential hazards, assessing the likelihood of exposure, figuring out the potential harm.
So it's about being strategic and focusing on prevention rather than just reacting after the fact.
Absolutely. It's all about prioritizing your efforts and targeting your interventions where they'll have the most impact.
Makes sense. Now, what happens in those situations where, you might not have all the scientific data you need to make a clear-cut decision?
Well, that's where the precautionary principle comes in.
Okay, the precautionary principle.
This principle basically empowers you to take those provisional measures to protect public health, even when there's some degree of uncertainty.
Right, because sometimes you can't wait for all the answers, especially when public health is at stake.
Exactly. You have to act on the best available information at the time.
Makes sense. Now, another important point that I noticed in this regulation is the emphasis on the responsibility of food business operators themselves.
Oh, absolutely. It's a shared responsibility. While you as an EHO are there to enforce the regulations, the primary duty to ensure food safety rests with the businesses.
So they can't just say, oh, the EHO will catch it.
Nope, not at all. They're the ones on the front lines. They handle the food, they prepare it, they serve it. Their actions have a direct impact on the health of their customers.
Right, it's their responsibility to make sure things are done right from the start.
Exactly. They have to take all the necessary steps to ensure their food is safe and to inform the authorities if they suspect any potential hazards.
So it's a team effort, which is reassuring.
Absolutely. Everyone has a role to play in keeping food safe.
Okay, so we've talked about the code of practice, which is kind of like the overarching guide, and then the general food law, which sets those foundational principles. Now, let's get into the nitty-gritty of what you can actually do as an EHO when you find something wrong during an inspection. This is where The Food Safety and Hygiene England Regulations 2013 come into the play, right?
They do, that's right. You can think of these regulations as your toolkit for tackling non-compliance. They give you a range of options, each tailored to different situations you might encounter.
Okay, a toolkit. I like that. So what's in this toolkit? What can you actually do when you find something amiss during an inspection?
Well, let's start with the hygiene improvement notice. Imagine you walk into a restaurant and you notice some minor hygiene issues. Maybe they're not storing food properly or the hand washing facilities aren't quite up to snuff.
Not ideal, but maybe not a shut it down situation either.
Exactly. It's not an immediate threat to public health, but it definitely needs to be addressed. This is where the hygiene improvement notice comes in. You issue this notice, and it requires the business to make those necessary improvements within a specific time frame.
Okay, so it's like a formal way of saying, hey, you need to fix this.
Precisely. It's a structured approach, giving them clear instructions and a deadline for making those improvements.
Right, so it's all very clear and above board.
Exactly. Now, let's say you walk into a place and you encounter a more serious situation. Maybe there's evidence of pest infestation, a major temperature control issue, or just a widespread lack of basic hygiene practices.
Okay, now we're talking about something more serious, something that could actually put people at risk.
Right. These are situations that could pose an immediate risk to public health.
So what are your options then? What can you do?
In those cases, you have the power to issue a hygiene prohibition order. This allows you to temporarily close down the food business to protect public health. It's not something you do lightly, but it's absolutely essential in protecting consumers from potential harm. Think of it like this. You're putting up a barrier, a safety valve, to prevent any immediate risks.
Yeah, it's serious stuff. And then there's that hygiene emergency prohibition.
Yeah.
Notice that one sounds even more intense, right? What makes that one different?
So that notice, that's for those really critical situations, where there's an immediate and undeniable threat to public health. It requires you to act right away.
So like hitting the emergency brake.
Mm-hmm.
No waiting for a court hearing, no extra steps, just immediate action.
Exactly. You can shut the operation down on the spot.
So if I walk into a bakery and I see like raw sewage leaking near where they're preparing food, that's an emergency prohibition situation.
Absolutely. No question about it. You got to protect the public, and sometimes there's just no time to waste.
Okay, so we've got those notices for improvement, then the prohibitions for temporary closures, and then those emergency prohibitions when you need to shut things down right away. What other tools do you have in that toolkit of yours?
Let's say you're dealing with an establishment that needs specific approval under the regulations, like a meat processing plant or something. If they're not meeting those required standards, you can issue a remedial action notice.
Okay, a remedial action notice.
Right. And what this does is it allows you to restrict their operations until they can show they're back in compliance.
So it's a way of ensuring that only safe food is being produced and distributed from these approved places.
Exactly. You're holding them accountable and making sure they're following the rules to protect public health.
Okay, makes sense. And I guess finally, there's always the power of taking samples.
Ah, yes, samples. Never underestimate those. You have the authority to purchase or take samples of food, ingredients, surfaces, whatever you need, and then have those analyzed by a food examiner.
So it's like gathering evidence, right? You're not just relying on what you see, you can get scientific confirmation.
Exactly. It's objective proof, which can be really valuable if you need to take further action down the line.
It's like building a strong case.
Precisely. Now, those are the main enforcement tools you have at your disposal, but I think it's important to remember that enforcement is only one part of the picture.
Right. It's not just about cracking down on businesses all the time.
Exactly. It's also about working with them collaboratively to foster a genuine culture of food safety.
So how do you actually do that? How do you move beyond just, checking boxes and really get businesses to buy into the importance of food safety?
Well, I think one of the most important things is recognizing that every food business is different. A small family-run cafe is going to have very different needs and challenges compared to a massive food processing plant.
Right. They're totally different beasts.
You can't just take a one-size-fits-all approach. You need to be adaptable, Take a tailored approach that considers the specific context of each business.
Okay, so what might that look like in practice?
Well, imagine you're working with a brand new food business that's just starting out. Instead of just handing them a huge stack of regulations and saying, good luck, you could offer them a more hands-on approach.
Something a little more, interactive.
Exactly. Maybe you could host a workshop specifically for them, tailored to their type of operation. Maybe you could walk them through the basics of HACCP principles and record keeping.
Ah, HACCP. Good old HACCP.
Or you could even do a mock inspection with them, to help them understand what you'll be looking for during a real inspection.
Oh, that's a great idea. So much better than just leaving them to decipher all those dense legal documents on their own.
Right. It shows that you're there to support them, not just to police them. And when businesses feel supported, they're much more likely to embrace those good practices and see food safety as a partnership.
It's about building that trust and that rapport, which is so important for long-term change.
Absolutely. But what about those businesses that, maybe have a history of noncompliance? Those can be a bit trickier.
Yeah, for sure. How do you approach those situations?
I think building trust is even more critical in those cases. Sometimes a collaborative approach can be far more effective than just hitting them with a bunch of notices or fines.
So instead of just coming down hard, you're trying to work with them to find solutions.
Exactly. Maybe you could work with them to develop a step-by-step improvement plan, offering guidance and support along the way. You could even connect them with some resources or training programs to help them address those specific challenges they're facing.
It's like taking on a mentor role almost.
In a way, yes. You're walking alongside them on their journey to better food safety practices.
I like that. And as they make progress and see those tangible benefits, fewer issues during inspections, happier customers, a better reputation, hopefully their whole attitude towards food safety shifts.
Yeah, that's the hope. They move from just trying to avoid getting penalized to actually understanding the value of food safety and wanting to maintain those high standards.
Because at the end of the day, it's about protecting people, right?
Exactly. It's about ensuring that everyone has access to safe, healthy food.
Now, beyond working directly with individual businesses, are there other ways that EHOs can promote a broader culture of food safety in their communities?
Absolutely. And I think one of the most powerful tools we have is education. EHOs are in a unique position to share their knowledge and expertise.
Right, you're the experts.
You could organize workshops or seminars for food businesses in your area covering topics like allergen management, preventing cross-contamination, proper cleaning procedures, all that good stuff.
It's about creating that learning community where businesses can come together, share their experiences, and learn from each other.
Exactly. And it's a chance to demystify some of those regulations, answer any questions they might have and clear up any misconceptions.
Make it all feel a little less daunting.
Exactly. And something else that can be really powerful, positive reinforcement.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, when you come across businesses that are going above and beyond, really taking that extra step to implement those excellent food safety practices, acknowledge it. Let them know you see their effort.
It's amazing what a simple thank you can do.
It really is. A little recognition goes a long way, maybe a letter of commendation or a shout out on your local authority's website.
Yeah. Show them off a bit, right? Reward that good behavior.
Exactly. It sends that message that you're not just there to find problems, you're there to celebrate good practices as well.
So it's a more positive and encouraging approach.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, beyond, those traditional methods, I've seen some EHOs get really creative with how they engage businesses and really, move the needle on food safety.
Oh, tell me more about that. What kind of creative strategies are we talking about?
Well, for example, some EHOs have started using social media to connect with businesses and share information about food safety.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, they might create a Facebook page or a Twitter account specifically for their food safety program.
Okay, and what kind of stuff do they share?
Oh, all sorts of things, tips on food handling, updates on new regulations, reminders about upcoming training sessions. They might even post photos from inspections, highlighting both good and bad practices.
So they're using social media to create a more, open dialogue about food safety.
Exactly. And it's a way to reach a wider audience, too. Not every business owner is going to attend a workshop or read a newsletter, but they might see a post on Facebook.
Right, it's about meeting them where they are.
Exactly. And it can be a really effective way to engage younger audiences, too, those who are just starting out in the food industry.
And speaking of younger audiences, some EOs are actually partnering with local schools to deliver food safety education programs for children.
Oh, that's a great idea.
Yeah, they're going right to the source, teaching kids those good habits from a young age.
Love that. And those kids can then take those lessons home and share them with their families. It's all about creating that ripple effect.
It's a long-term investment in food safety.
It really is. And it's
Yeah.
not just about traditional methods like workshops and seminars. I mean, think about technology.
Oh, yeah, technology is playing a bigger and bigger role in food safety these days.
It is. There's a whole wave of new apps and online platforms designed specifically for food businesses.
I've seen some of those. They can do everything from, like, staff training to record keeping.
Absolutely. And some of them can even send alerts if, say, a refrigerator's temperature goes out of range.
Wow, so they're basically using tech to streamline their food safety management and stay on top of things more easily.
Exactly. And the great thing is that EHOs can be a part of this too.
Yeah.
Instead of shying away from these new tools, you can actually become an advocate for them.
So it's like you're a tech consultant for food safety.
In a way, yes. And if businesses are using these systems to keep better records and monitor their operations more closely, it can actually make your job easier too.
Oh, how so?
Well, you might be able to access some of that data remotely, or you might be able to spot potential issues before they even become a problem during an inspection.
So it's like you're all working together using technology to create a more transparent and proactive food safety system.
Exactly. And here's another area where I think EHOs can have a real impact, working with local food banks and charities.
Oh, that's a really important point.
These organizations often handle donated food, and they might not have the same resources or expertise as commercial businesses when it comes to food safety.
Right. They might not have dedicated staff or training programs.
Exactly. And that's where EHOs can step in and provide valuable guidance. You can teach them about safe food handling practices, explain those proper storage requirements, and even help them set up their own simplified food safety management systems.
So you're extending that culture of food safety beyond just commercial businesses and into the wider community.
Precisely. It's about ensuring that everyone has access to safe food, regardless of their circumstances.
Well said. Now, before we wrap up, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what the future holds for food safety in England. What are some of the big trends and challenges that EHOs will need to be prepared for in the coming years?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges we're facing is the increasing complexity of the food supply chain. Food is coming from all over the world these days.
Right, it's a global network.
It makes it a lot harder to track and trace its journey from farm to fork.
It's not as simple as it used to be.
Not at all. And this complexity means we need new ways of thinking about risk assessment and management. EHOs are going to need to be experts in things like import controls, food fraud prevention, and navigating all those international food standards.
So it's a whole new level of expertise.
Definitely. And on top of that, there's the growing consumer demand for transparency and sustainability. People want to know where their food comes from, how it was produced, what impact it has on the environment.
They want to feel good about the food they're eating.
Exactly. And EHOs can play a key role in that by providing consumers with accurate and reliable information.
Right, helping them make informed choices.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about technology, the role it's going to play. We're already seeing some really exciting innovations like blockchain for tracking food shipments, AI for analyzing food safety data, even sensors that can monitor storage conditions in real time.
It sounds like the food safety world is on the verge of a major tech upgrade.
It is. And those EHOs who embrace these technologies are going to be in a much better position to handle the challenges of the future.
Right. It's about working smarter, not harder.
Exactly. By staying ahead of the curve and embracing those innovations, EHOs can help ensure that England stays a leader in food safety.
Well, that's a very optimistic and inspiring vision for the future. It's clear that the role of an EHO is constantly evolving, and the work you do is more important than ever.
It is. And remember, you're not just enforcing rules, you're safeguarding public health and making a real difference in people's lives.
That's a great point to end on. To all those EHOs out there, thank you for everything you do. Keep up that amazing work.
Absolutely. You are essential.
And that's it for this deep dive into food hygiene rules in England. We hope you found it informative, insightful, and maybe even a little inspiring.
Until next time, stay curious and stay safe.
And bon appetit.